right, welcome back to the Point. We are about half an hour from question time, but before we get there, we're going to talk to two people on the back bench, Tim Watts and Julia Banks. Thanks so much for joining us out of our Canberra studio.
Great to be here, thanks.
Julia Banks, guys. Let me start with you if I can. Why are you guys supping with the devil, One Nation preferences?
Look, from my perspective, that's a matter for the West Australian Liberal Party. I think it's a bit rich that the Labor Party are carrying on about this when they have a clear Labor-Greens coalition happening every day. You know, from my perspective, there's so many policies that I do not agree with and positions that the One Nation Party comes to. I'm a Liberal and support the Liberal policies and positioning.
So you don't agree with Arthur Sinodinos that One Nation have become more sophisticated?
Well, that's Arthur's view. My view is that, from my perspective, the West Australian Liberal Party have made that decision, and that's a decision for them, for that party, in the context of that election. With the effluxion of time, obviously things change in terms of people, parties, party positions. But you know, from my perspective, it's a hypothetical question because I'm a federal member for Chisholm, and certainly from my perspective, I don't agree with a lot of One Nation principles and values. Unlike the Labor Party, who, you know, the federal Labor Party, from time and time again, are basically moving closer and closer to the Greens, and we've seen that on energy and on energy security. And, you know, that's pretty much the position of the Labor Party.
Tim Watts, do you want to respond to this? Do you want to explain to us how a preference deal between Labor and the Greens is different than a preference deal between the Liberals and the One Nation?
It's not different, is it?
Well, I'm asking Tim Watts to tell us if it's different.
Well, I can explain how it's different, guys. You'll be unsurprised to hear that I'm no fan of the Greens political party. In fact, I think they're irresponsible posturing on things like the ANZUS security alliance between Australia and the US deserves far more scrutiny than it gets at the moment. But the difference is that the Greens will never be in a position to exercise influence over those areas of policy. Their presence in the parliament itself is not damaging Australia's security interests. The difference with One Nation is that the views expressed by One Nation senators are already hurting both Australia's international reputation and hurting people in our community who are the targets of their prejudice. So we see Arthur Sinodinos saying, well, the One Nation's more sophisticated now. They're not targeting Asians, they're targeting Muslims. But, you know, for Indonesia and Malaysia, I don't see they think they see the difference.
Hang on, what's the difference? Why do One Nation have an impact but the Greens don't? There are more Greens in Parliament than there are One Nation. Their vote historically has been higher. They've been in an alliance with the Labor Party in government, which One Nation has never been, as of yet at least, with the Liberal Party. I don't understand why, if you think that they're as bad as each other, which is essentially your premise, you then turn around and say, but One Nation somehow has the ability to have a more damaging influence thereafter. I would have said the opposite, looking at the history.
No, I certainly don't say they're as bad as each other. I say that they're differently bad. So the Greens will not be in a position to exercise influence over the ANZUS alliance in Australia. I can guarantee you that. The difference with One Nation is when they spout off against Muslims, when they spout off against things like halal bans, that prejudice is against people in our own community, in the Australian community. That has impacts. It also has impacts with important relationships that we have with countries in our region, like Indonesia, like Malaysia. So the mere presence of One Nation senators in our parliament hurts us. And let's just be clear here, the only reason we're talking about this is because Malcolm Turnbull is unable to exercise influence in his own political party. John Howard, for all his flaws, I'm no fan of John Howard, you know, George Bush used to call him his man of steel. Well, Malcolm Turnbull we can call the man of war jellyfish because he has no spine, he's happy to drift in the oceans of far right-wing currents, you know, taking them where he wants. And as soon as you come into contact with him, he changes shape. He doesn't stand for anything. That's why we're talking about One Nation preferences, because Malcolm Turnbull isn't able to exercise influence over on the West Australian branch, or, Julia should keep in mind, the Victorian branch, where Michael Kroger is talking about doing a similar deal in the upcoming Victorian state election and presumably the federal election.
Well, indeed, from my perspective, One Nation, all those principles and policies that Tim describes of One Nation, I certainly don't agree with.
But you're happy to give them preferences?
No, I would never espouse. I didn't say I'm happy to give them preferences.
Well, call it out. Say you're not happy to give them preferences.
But you're not doing that on the Greens. You say you disagree with everything that the Greens do. But then you're happy to take their
Exactly.
preferences and do...
No, I'm saying that the Greens
want to
are
rid
not
of
in a
our
position to do
US
anything.
alliance, the most enduring alliance. You know, Adam Bandt stood up in Parliament yesterday and to say the Greens don't have power is pretty... It's so rich and so hypocritical, and it's again typical of the hypocrisy of the Labor Party that we're seeing time and time again.
In fairness, Julie Banks,
Yeah.
Julie Banks, the Liberal Party over and over again kept talking about the demon of the relationship between the Greens and the Labor Party. And yet now you guys, to use the hypocrite word, are now doing the same thing with One Nation.
But
I mean, my criticism goes both ways.
But I was also going to say...
No, we're not. No, we're not. Go ahead, Julia. We're certainly not. We're certainly not. We're not agreeing to any of the policies of Pauline Hanson. I'm certainly not agreeing to a lot of her policies and her principles. But the basic fact here is that it's been proven time and time again. The facts are that the Labor Party are in coalition with the Greens. They're getting more and more green, as we say, and all you have to do is look at Exhibit A in South Australia, where they have an energy policy that is so green and unrealistic, and we're heading down the same path in Victoria with a Labor government there. And what does that create? It creates the lights aren't on. It's a sort of sloppy planning, energy security, terrible, and people, hospitals can't operate, people can't turn their air conditioning on. It's just created a third world country with their greening coalition.
Third world country, that's a big call, Julia Banks.
That's just a general statement on Adelaide.
Have you visited a third world country? I've got to ask.
I mean, that is a hugely...
I have indeed. Don't you accept that as a ridiculous statement?
May I say...
What part
may I say, Christina, what's happening in South Australia is absolutely absurd and ridiculous, and it shouldn't be happening in Australia. It should not be happening in Australia.
So how much should we spend? How much should we spend to how much should we spend to storm-proof our electricity infrastructure against a 1 in 50-year storm? How much should we spend?
Well, basically, we're following the energy is being managed by a Labor government in South Australia.
No, actually, it's being managed. It's actually being managed by the Australian Energy AEMO. They're managing it.
The Australian AEMO that. They basically confirmed that they have created such an infrastructure that it couldn't cope with extreme weather events.
So that's my point.
That's why they had to pull
How much should we
from
spend?
the interconnector in Victoria.
How much should we spend? The coalition government carries on that we don't have the right infrastructure, we don't have enough generators, we don't have enough supply, we need to have clean coal. I have yet to hear the coalition government articulate how much Australia should spend to withstand a 1 in 50-year weather event.
So in terms of, and to answer that, unlike the Labor Party, we have a very clear roadmap which will consolidate energy security and affordability. It's about electric prices. It's not about shutting down, like, for example, the coal royalties in Hazelwood. The Labor Party and their friends, the Greens, were rejoicing at the closure of Hazelwood. All those people lost their jobs, and at the same time, if we're faced with a continuing Labor Party, we're going to get electricity price rises. Like it's just
you're not
going to
answering
hit the
my
bottom
question.
line.
But they're selling snake oil here, Christina. Let's be frank here. The clean coal generators that they're now talking about funding would take a minimum of 10 years to complete. That's if you think it's a good idea. And if you think it's a good idea, you'd be pretty lonely, because at the moment you've got even the AIG, you've got economists, you've got scientists, you've got the Australian business community all saying that public funding for clean coal generators is not the future.
But Tim Watts,
this is
can I
a
ask a
sideshow.
question?
This is snake oil.
Look, here's the issue for me, though, Tim Watts, is even if you accept that clean coal is not where the money should go, and by and large the investment sector seems to be supporting that position, it is a distorted market at the moment because there is government funding going into some renewables and not into other forms of potentially cleaner energy. But put all of that to one side. Gas moratoriums at the state level, that's the biggest problem here. And both sides of politics don't seem to be willing to muscle up to high-profile commentators in particular and sections of the community that are concerned about gas exploration and mining. Yet that is very clean, it's abundant, and it's price-effective. And neither side of politics seems to want to go there.
Yeah, gas is a big part of the solution here, absolutely. But that's not what's caused what's gone on in South Australia recently, and it's not what's caused what's gone on in New South Wales and Queensland. On the issue of renewables, we've got solar power providing effectively a large-scale power plant worth of capacity into Brisbane during the heat wave that they had on the weekend there. So this has a direct contribution to ensuring that, that continuity of supply and keeping energy prices down. Julia was talking about this being all about energy prices. If that was true, this Liberal government would be supporting an emissions intensity scheme, recommended by their own chief scientist, recommended by their own energy regulator, supported by business in Australia. Everyone says that that is the scheme that will provide the investment certainty for gas, for renewables, for all forms of energy that we need to deal with the issues currently being experienced in our electricity sector. The reason they're opposed to it? Political ideology, tactics.
Well,
it's
just
rubbish.
speaking of political ideology, it's the ideology of the Labor and the Greens in terms of their unrealistic renewables target, and I'd ask them to come to one of the 15,000 small businesses in Victoria who are fearful of what is happening in South Australia will happen in Victoria as well, and that businesses will close. People are losing money, thousands and thousands of dollars, because they simply can't work their factories. So ideology has to be broken down into reality so that we can get on with implementing our roadmap, because only the coalition is basically looking at this from a very measured, targeted way to ensure energy security and affordability.
We're going to run out of time and we need to move on to the other big issue of the day. You both had your say there on energy. Let me move to welfare savings. The omnibus bill looks like it's dead, buried and cremated after Nick Xenophon made clear that he won't be supporting it. Julia Banks, to you first. Should the government now look at breaking this bill apart and trying at least to get the childcare changes through? This was announced in 2014. Children born then are soon going to be entering school. They're going to be past the age of needing childcare support, their families. Should the government look at breaking this bill apart now and trying to at least get childcare changes through the Parliament?
As a follow-up, though, can I just ask, surely it has to be revenue neutral, however they were to break it apart, because otherwise all you're doing is adding to the debt.
Well, our principle has always been that our childcare policy, first of all, it's a very good policy, and what's standing in the way of the childcare reforms is the Labor Party. That's the simple fact. So we have countless examples of people who are saying, this is fantastic, when's it going to start? And, you know, the Labor Party are basically blocking it. Now, the childcare reform that we put in place, and having been a working mum, you know, all my life and used childcare and knowing a number, you know, friends and people in my constituency, childcare is key to getting women back in the workplace. It's that simple. It is key to getting women back in the workplace. And if the Labor Party bothered to read the Productivity Commission report, we need more people in the workplace.
Well, that is my point,
women.
I suppose. So Joe Hockey even made the point that if we hit, if we hit about half of Canada's female workforce participation, I think he said we'd have a 2% increase in GDP. You know, this is incredibly important. So should the government look at some strategic way? You say Labor's blocking it. Tim, I imagine you're about to tell us that you're not willing to rob one vulnerable family to pay for changes to another. You know, this argument seems to just be circular. Is there some way we can get to some type of common ground where we can get this change through the Parliament? Tim, you first.
Well, the start to getting to common ground is to engage in good faith negotiations, good faith back and forward. Now, when Tony Abbott lost the Prime Ministership, we were told that Malcolm Turnbull was going to come in, the smooth operator, the merchant banker, the deal maker, and he was going to charm the Senate and be able to get these things through. Now, since then, we've seen the extraordinary activity of the last few days where Christian Porter, the Prime Minister, the Treasurer, linked this childcare package, linked all of the cuts to carers, families, new mums, to the NDIS's future. Now, whoever the political genius was that came up with that idea in the ministerial suite, in the Prime Minister's office, they need to get out of Parliament House, they need to get out of the political bubble for a while, spend a day with a family of someone with a person with a disability. Because for them to hold the human dignity of people with disability hostage in the name of trying to achieve this political goal, trying to achieve these cuts to families, carers, new mums, was one of the most disgraceful things that I've seen in this Parliament. And the political craziness of it, it just makes you question whether this is a legitimate partner that you can work with, that you can talk to and say, are you trying to achieve the same things that we're trying to achieve in this parliament?
You're talking about the politicisation of disability, Tim Watts. I reported back in 2013 that Bill Shorten, when he first started advocating for the NDIS, told someone that there are a lot of votes in disability. Is that the wrong approach as well?
Well, there are a lot of votes in disability because there are a lot of people with disability. There are a lot of people.
Surely
with,
the framing of it
with
shouldn't be
families,
whether
with
there's
friends.
votes in it. Surely the framing should be that it's the right thing to do.
Well, nobody is framing this in votes. I mean, Bill Shorten has an extremely long record of advocating the need for the NDIS as a moral imperative for our society. I mean, there has been no better advocate, maybe Jenny Macklin, for the moral imperative for the NDIS. Now, the fact that it is also politically popular, because guess what? Usually the right thing to do is the politically popular thing to do, is beside the point as far as I'm concerned. Holding that hostage in order to achieve a separate political outcome, I think that's the disgraceful thing.
Well, I think speaking practically and pragmatically and doing the right thing, there are thousands of mums out there, new mums, who have got their kids at school age, who desperately need childcare, and the people that are the party that's stopping this is the Labor Party. This is the most significant childcare reform ever, and it's making it more affordable, flexible. It accommodates mums, and I will be a champion for these reforms for as long as it takes to get them through, because I just cannot believe the intransigence and the politics involved in this, based on the Labor Party, who are, trying to basically block it when there's thousands and thousands of people out there, particularly at the beginning of the school year, which is, we want this to get through as soon as possible, because I know that childcare planning is part of every woman and every parent's concerns in terms of running their everyday lives. So take the politics out of it, and let's look at what's really good for Australian families.
Just a final question for both of you, maybe starting with you, Tim Watts. Both sides of the political major party divide, when they chart their pathway back to surplus, and you look at the long-term trend on this, whenever we get to this surplus, whether it's 2021 or 2023, who knows, if and when we get to it, all the projections have us getting to a surplus and then having a wafer-thin surplus for the next 20 or 30 or 40 years. Like the thinnest of thin surpluses over decade after decade after decade. My question for both of you is a very simple one. How do you then pay down debt? Tim Watts?
Well, I think you design a budget that's structurally sound, right? And what that means is having both savings and revenue measures. Now, a structurally sound budget in Australia means doing things like reforming negative gearing, reforming capital gains tax.
Yeah, but my point is, on all the projections from both sides, once you get into surplus, it's a wafer-thin surplus for the next X number of decades, according to the long-term projections. If that's the case, how do you ever pay down debt? Because you're not actually building a big surplus to pay down what is already a very, very big debt.
No, it's a bit of an abstract exercise to talk about wafer-thin margins in decades' time. So,
well, I think it's abstract to the Labor Party, but it's very clear.
You'll think it's too.
Very clear from an economic management perspective in terms of the coalition. We've seen time and time again the Labor Party get into power, they leave a trail of bloodshed, they leave a budget deficit, and we have to come in and clean it up.
But you're not. This is my problem. Everybody's
All right.
failing here. This is my problem.
Can I jump in here? We're running out of time.
Increase productivity.
Tim and Julie are going to, I believe, be back for future chats with us.
Well, you're worried that we're losing them?
I am. I'm suggesting that both of them can go read the forward estimates, the budget projections, and then be better prepared for your left field question.
And we'll get a nice graphic made up as well. Because
Indeed.
my point is, once you get to a wafer-thin surplus, you don't pay debt down.
We get your point.
No, I don't think everyone does get the point. Because it's the most important point in the economic debate at the moment in this country. And no one seems to want to talk about it.
All right, okay. Tim Watts, Julia Banks, thank you so much for coming on the program. Enjoy question time.
Thank you.
We'll see you again.